Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of The Mandatory. Remember, if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at The Mandatory TKO. You can also find us on the audio side as well, wherever you find your shows, podcasts. If you got a couple of minutes, leave a rate and review. Give us a 5-star because that helps the channel grow. And thanks so much for rocking with us this early morning, Tuesday morning. We do appreciate you for rocking with us. And remember, this is an interactive show, so please drop your comments because we will be getting to all of your comments. And it's a jam-packed show on this Tuesday because, you go back to last week, Bryan and I did a show, and about 24 hours later, that show didn't matter because this is what kind of happened. It's kind of the craziest thing that could happen within a span of like 4 or 5 days, whatever you may want to call it. But there were reports that Canelo and Bud Crawford were on for September. And there were reports that Jake Paul and Canelo would be fighting before Bud and Canelo. Then you hear that Canelo and Bud has been called off, but that he would still be fighting Jake Paul. So you're like, okay, he's going to be fighting Jake Paul. And then that gets called off. And it turns out Canelo Alvarez signs a 4-fight deal with Riyadh season. And it turns out Canelo will be fighting William Skull Cinco de Mayo weekend, but Bud and Canelo is still back on. And with that being said, Jake Paul hates all of that. Bryan, a little bit confusing, but that's literally what happened this past week. Like, that was our week, and we had recorded a show, and I was like, man, Canelo and Bud are off. Like, we did a whole segment on it. And we're doing it again because it's for real this time, right?
Canelo's got a 4-fight deal, and I think 3 of them he's supposed to fight in Saudi Arabia, which is just, I mean, like, okay, all right. The first one's against William Skull because, William Skull now has the IBF because Canelo gave it up before because he didn't want to fight him before. Now that he has his money because Canelo, just moved by the money. Are we doing predictions tonight? Ryan Hong asks. Yeah, we're gonna do predictions.
Also, just a heads up, it was reported that the Canelo Riyadh season deal is like 350 M's. Like a ridiculous amount. But like I think that's
Oh,
probably
this
one of the
kid.
most interesting factors of the deal is 3 out of the 4 are in Saudi.
That's what the money's for. Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but at least, I mean, if we're going to go by the rumors that were earlier in the week, last week, Bud and Canelo should be in the States. That's what it was reported. There were talks about like Dallas, there were talks about Vegas,
Mhm.
but it sounds like it is going to be in the States where it should be. But yeah, 3 out of those 4 fights in Saudi, and I think that's really important. Like,
Yeah.
that I feel like people are focusing more on, we're getting these fights, but at the same time, we're not getting them in North America. And I think that's an issue. That's an issue that nobody's talking about yet. Like, all these big fights are in Saudi, and I don't know if people are more just excited that we're getting the fights, which is cool, but I think atmosphere is huge. I think the fact that you can go to Vegas, the fact that you can go to New York, the fact that, it's a little bit closer than going to the UK, obviously. But these fights aren't even happening in the UK. Like, they're happening in Saudi. You know what I mean? So I think that's a very interesting piece. And I think it's clouded by the fact that, whoa, we're going to be getting these fights. We're going to be getting these fights. But we're not actually thinking about the fact that they're not here. These big ass fights. Well, Canelo and William Skull, I mean, they could have that there.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna say, like Canelo Williams Skull, you can keep that over there. Jesus says 350 million is not real. Listen, I'm sure I'm sure it's a ton of money because these dudes just have a ton of money, which is why when it all comes crashing down and they just stop deciding to bankroll like all these fighters, it's going to be damaging for the sport in a lot of different ways. Like long term, short term, a lot of guys are going to get paid, but long term, that shit it'll have an end point, and then we're going to stop pretending like certain guys are worth you know excess of 9 and 8 figures and things of that nature. Like Gervonta Davis, say what you want. He made I thought was an interesting point where he says a lot of dudes are going to Saudi Arabia because they can't sell in the States. And when you look at, like, no disrespect, but Shakur Stevenson is he even the co-main for this Riyadh season card coming up in February 22nd against Floyd Schofield.
I don't think
And
so.
yeah, it's a fight that otherwise would be in Newark, and he got booed in his hometown in Newark because of his style of fight or whatever the case may be. I'm sure the people in Saudi Arabia are absolutely going to be, jumping up and down when they watch Shakur Stevenson fight Floyd Schofield. I'm sure of it. I'm sure the environment's going to be amazing. You know what I mean? I'm sure that they're going to be fucking, super ecstatic to watch him perform after he got booed in his hometown here. But that's really what this is. Canelo Alvarez is obviously different. He could sell, but he just wanted the most money possible. You know, this is like a Juan Soto situation, except with more back end problems, if you will.
And at the same time, I see both sides in a sense where not both sides. I see Canelo's side. I would want all the money as well at this point in my career. Like, why not? And if it was a number that Canelo thought was fair to him and he was going to get the bag, I mean, I can't be mad at that. The only thing I can kind of be mad at as a boxing fan is these fights are in Saudi. But like I mentioned, it kind of brings a little bit of cachet, more cachet, because the Bud Canelo fight is going to be the biggest fight of the year. It will be for undisputed because Canelo is going to fight William Skull and he should easily beat William Skull. We are going to get to your comments. And William Skull's going to get paid too. Like, he just got a big payday going to
Sure.
Saudi as
Yeah.
well. So props to him, right? He's going to get a big payday. But that sets up a massive fight in September, arguably one of the biggest fights of this generation, this era. Bud and Canelo for undisputed. And that's why they're setting it up like this. And that's also why we mentioned Jake Paul, that Jake Paul is in the setup for Bud and Canelo. It makes it so much more interesting. And I don't think all undisputeds are the same.
Hmm.
Right? But this one will have the cachet of the promotion of Canelo Bud Crawford for undisputed. And all the casual fans are going to be like on this fight. So I think it sets it up in that way. And that's kind of the good part about it. But Brian, now that we know that we are going to get this fight, like, things still have to be signed and stuff, but it looks like this is going to happen. I want to also mention something else because we've talked about this. We've talked about what weight class this is going to be. Mr. Terrence Crawford stepped on the scale the other day and it looked like he was 186 pounds.
Hmm.
I don't think he cares about what weight class he's going to fight in, but
Somebody joked that Bo Mac just put his toe on the scale.
oh my God, not Bomax toe. Oh my God. That's actually a good joke. Whoever said that, that's a hilarious joke. But 186 pounds, like, Bud is probably looking big. I'm really curious to know what weight class this is going to be. But your thoughts on,
It's 168. It's happening at 168.
yeah,
I'm telling you, like there's Terrence Crawford is gonna go straight up. There's gonna be no catch weight. Like it's he's just gonna do it. He's not, I'm not gonna say crazy enough, but like just he has the self-belief to be able to be like, all right, I'm gonna just go from 154 to 168. I think Terrence Crawford, as confident as he is in himself, like he would entertain going up even further than that in the future. Like I don't think he cares. I think he legitimately thinks he can move up to Canelo Alvarez's weight and beat Canelo Alvarez. Which, if Canelo Alvarez has another decision victory against William Skull, who, I think Cuban fighters could often be overlooked and underrated because of the style that they bring forth. It's not always like the most aesthetically pleasing, but if you look at William Skull's actual boxing and his resume, like I don't even think he's the best Cuban in this weight class. Like we've talked about Osles Iglesias, for example,
yeah.
who knocked out Evgeny Shvedenko, who William Skull beat by decision, and it was not a super entertaining fight. He just doesn't have like the resume of somebody who's like, oh yeah, I think they can give Canelo Alvarez a challenge.
He
And
was
name
fighting like eight
wise,
round fights. Like, he hasn't,
yeah,
I
like
got to check his resume, but has he fought a 12 round bout?
yeah, because he has a title, but that's
Yeah.
it. Like it's that
He
fight and
was
like
fighting, he was fighting like 8 round bouts like 2 years ago,
no,
though.
yeah, like no last year.
Yeah.
within the last year. Like he won an 8 round fight against Hemphill. But he,
It's
he
terrible.
won his title in Germany because I think he may have defected to Germany.
A lot of his
Um,
fights are in Germany, though, from what I remember seeing off his record. I
yeah,
mean, he's
and
23 and
there
0.
have been some Cubans who like have defected all the way to different parts of Europe also, and he lives in Germany from what I understand. He beat Vladimir Shishkin. This was in October. I remember we may have touched on this. We may not have talked about it up here, but that was a close fight. It wasn't a fight that a lot of people cared about, and he ended up winning what was the vacant IBF super middleweight championship. And other than that, I mean, there's a few 12-round fights here, but that's like for, IBO regional titles and not even the world title, just like the international super middleweight title for the IBO. So not the WBO, not the WBC, not the IBF. And like other than that, for the most part, yeah, it was mostly 8 round fights, a couple 10 rounders and a couple 12 rounders, but mostly 8 round fights for a long time. And now he's gonna get this Canelo Alvarez fight. And 3 fights ago, he beat someone who was 23, 18, and 3. And the fight before that, 26, 25, and 3. So that's sandwiched in between, Sean Hemphill, who's that? A lot of people would look at that and be like, who the fuck is that? And then Evgeny Shvedenko, who I mentioned, who was undefeated at the time. And a lot of people would look at me and say, who's that also? So there's not a single name on his resume that would get the standard boxing fan excited to see him fight Canelo Alvarez. In fact, I would go as far as to say, in terms of just name cachet, name recognition, intrigue, one, the rumored Jake Paul fight would have been much more captivating for a lot more people. And I think there are even some diehard boxing fans who would have rather seen that than see Canelo fight William Skull. And two, William Skull probably has the least amount of cachet and name recognition and substance, if you will, for somebody who's fighting Canelo Alvarez than Avni Yildirim when he took that Stay Busy fight during the pandemic in 2021. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at here. No
Well,
disrespect.
I think for William Skull, we know that he doesn't have a big name. We know that he doesn't have the names on the resume. And you mentioned Jake Paul. I think that fight could arguably be even more massive than Canelo and Bud. And not in the sense of like, I just mean the Jake Paul and everything that he brings to it. And you're getting a bunch of fans that transcend the sport and everything like that. It's just as big. And it could arguably, you could argue it could possibly be bigger considering what Jake Paul has done as of late. But like I said, the whole reason of fighting William Skull is so Bud and Canelo can be undisputed. That's the only reason why it's
Right.
being set up like that. So when
Right.
it comes to September, then there's the cachet of, yo, this is an undisputed fight.